Dr. Zivex's tentacles quivered uncontrollably as the creature in the transport cage let out another bone-chilling growl. The alien veterinarian backed away, his four eyes widening in terror, the cerulean skin on his face paling to an almost translucent shade. "By the 7 moons of Krylax," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the continuous rumbling growls. "What manner of beast have they brought to my clinic?" The creature, a massive, muscular quadruped with sleek black fur, gleaming amber eyes, and teeth that could easily tear through Zivex's exoskeleton paced within its confinement. Its powerful shoulders rolled with each step, claws clicking against the metal floor of the cage. Zivex had treated many Earth species since the Interstellar Medical Exchange program began 5 years ago, but nothing like this. The manifest labeled it as a domestic Earth predator, which seemed like a cruel joke considering there was nothing domestic about the beast currently snarling at him. The door to the examination room slid open with a soft hiss, and Zivex nearly jumped out of his exoskeleton. A human male entered, dressed in the standard blue jumpsuit of the Earth delegation. He was tall by human standards, with a weathered face and bright eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Dr. Zivex, I'm Frank Lawson, handler for the Earth Biological Exchange Program." The human extended a hand, then seemed to remember Zivex's cultural aversion to physical contact and withdrew it. "I see you've met Shadow." "Shadow?" Zivex repeated, his voice modulator clicking with stress. "You named this apex predator after an absence of light." Frank laughed, a sound that somehow made Zivex even more nervous. "She's a panther, technically a melanistic jaguar, part of our conservation program." The human approached the cage without hesitation, and Zivex felt his respiratory spiracles constrict in panic. "Please exercise caution." That creature appears highly aggressive, and to Zivex's astonishment, Frank simply unlatched the cage and reached inside. The massive panther growled again, but the sound changed in pitch, becoming less threatening and more irritated. "I know, girl." "Strange place, strange smells," Frank murmured, his hand finding a spot behind the beast's pointed ears. His fingers moved in a gentle scratching motion, and to Zivex's complete shock, the fearsome predator closed its eyes and leaned into the touch. A rumbling sound different from the growls emanated from its chest. "Is it malfunctioning?" Zivex asked. Utterly bewildered, Frank smiled. "She's purring, it means she's happy." He continued scratching the panther, which now looked about as dangerous as a sleeping infant quillion. "Shadow here needs her vaccines updated and a quick check for parasites before she can join our breeding program on Nexus Station." Zivex's professional instincts finally overcame his fear. He moved closer, still cautious but intrigued. "May I observe the interaction?" "Your ability to pacify this predator is remarkable." "Sure thing, want to try. She's actually pretty friendly once she knows you're not a threat," Zivex recoiled. "I do not believe that would be advisable. My species evolved as prey animals on Azuria. Our instinctual responses are deeply ingrained." Frank nodded understandingly. "Fair enough. Let me get her on the examination table and you can check her over while I keep her calm." As the human guided the massive panther out of the cage and onto the sterile examination surface, Zivex marveled at the contradiction before him. The predator that had moments ago seemed like death incarnate now followed the human's gentle guidance, occasionally pushing its head against his hand when the scratching stopped. "How is this possible?" Zivex asked, gathering his medical instruments with still trembling tentacles. "This creature could easily kill you." Frank shrugged. "Humans have been domesticating predators for thousands of years. We started with wolves, turned them into dogs, but even the wild ones can form bonds with us under the right circumstances." He smiled as Shadow rolled onto her side, exposing her belly. "It's about trust and respect. She knows I won't hurt her, and I know how to read her signals." Zivex approached carefully, scanner in hand. "May I?" Frank nodded, continuing to scratch behind Shadow's ears while Zivex ran the medical scanner over her body. The panther's eyes tracked him, but she remained calm under Frank's touch. "Her vital signs appear normal for her species," Zivex reported, gaining confidence as the examination progressed. "Though I detect some inflammation in her lower right paw." Frank gently lifted the paw in question, and Shadow allowed it without protest. "You're right. Looks like she might have stepped on something sharp. Can you treat it?" "Certainly." Zivex prepared a topical antibiotic and a small tissue regenerator. As he approached with the medical tools, Shadow's ears flattened slightly, and a low growl rumbled in her chest. "It's okay, Shadow," Frank soothed, scratching that special spot behind her ears again. "He's going to help you feel better." To Zivex's amazement, the panther relaxed once more. He carefully treated the inflamed pad on her paw, marveling at how the fearsome predator allowed him a natural prey species to touch her most vulnerable parts. "Fascinating," Zivex murmured as he completed the treatment. "On my world, such an interaction would be impossible. Predator and prey do not coexist peacefully." Frank nodded thoughtfully. "Earth was like that once too, but humans changed the equation. We're predators ourselves in many ways, but we're also caretakers. We learned that respect earns respect, even from the wildest creatures." As Zivex administered the required vaccines, he found his fear gradually giving way to professional curiosity. And this, scratching behind the ears. "It has a calming effect on many Earth species, many mammals, yes, dogs, cats, even some livestock. It's a comfort thing. Areas they can't easily reach themselves, and the touch releases endorphins." "Remarkable," Zivex said, finishing the examination. "Your species' ability to form bonds with predators may explain how humans have adapted so quickly to interstellar society, despite being relatively new to space travel." Frank smiled, giving Shadow one final scratch before guiding her back into her transport cage. "Could be. We've always been good at making friends in unexpected places." He latched the cage and turned to Zivex. "Thanks for your help, Doctor. I know treating Earth species can be challenging." Zivex's color had returned to its normal cerulean hue, his tentacles now steady. "It was educational. I would be willing to examine more of your Earth predators in the future, provided you are present to perform the necessary ear scratching." Frank laughed. "It's a deal. Actually, we have a lion coming through next week that needs a dental check." Zivex's color drained again, but this time there was a hint of excitement mixed with his fear. "A lion, the apex predator with the mane. I have studied their dental structure in texts only." "Don't worry," Frank assured him. "Lions are just big cats. They love a good ear scratch too." As Frank left with Shadow, Zivex made notes in his medical log, adding a special annotation. "Technique observed scratching behind ears effective for pacifying Earth predators. Must study further applications for veterinary practice." 3 days later, Zivex found himself facing another transport cage, this one even larger than Shadow's had been. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he read the manifest. "African lion, male, 8 Earth years." Frank stood beside him, looking completely at ease. "This is Titan. He's part of the same conservation program as Shadow. His pride is being relocated to Nexus Station to establish a breeding population." Zivex stared at the magnificent creature. Titan was massive, with a thick mane of golden-brown fur surrounding his face. His amber eyes seemed to look right through Zivex, assessing him as either threat or prey. The lion yawned, displaying rows of teeth that could crush bone with ease. "He requires a dental examination," Zivex asked, his voice higher than usual. "Yes, and a general health check before transport to Nexus," Frank confirmed. "Don't worry, I've worked with Titan for years. He knows me." Despite Frank's reassurances, Zivex felt his fear returning as the human opened the cage. Titan emerged with a fluid grace that belied his size, muscles rippling beneath his tawny coat. He let out a low rumble that Zivex felt in his very core. "Easy, big guy," Frank said softly, extending his hand to the lion. To Zivex's amazement, Titan pushed his massive head against Frank's palm, seeking contact. Frank's fingers found that same spot behind the ears, and just like Shadow, the fearsome predator melted into the touch. "Incredible," Zivex whispered. "The same technique works on a creature 3 times larger. The principle is the same," Frank explained, guiding Titan to the reinforced examination table. respect, trust, and knowing where they like to be scratched. Emboldened by his experience with Shadow, Zivex approached more confidently this time. He ran his scanner over Titan's body while Frank kept the lion calm with continuous ear scratches and soft words. "His vital signs are excellent," Zivex reported, "but I do detect some wear on his lower canines." "May I examine his mouth?" Frank nodded. "Let me adjust his position." He gently guided Titan's head, murmuring reassurances as he did so. "Open up, buddy." To Zivex's astonishment, the lion opened his mouth on command, allowing the veterinarian to use a small light to examine his teeth. "The wear is within normal parameters for his age," Zivex concluded, "but I would recommend a protective coating to prevent further erosion. It is a simple procedure." As Zivex prepared the dental equipment, he noticed Frank's continuous attention to the lion. The human never stopped the gentle scratching, never broke eye contact with the predator. "Your dedication to these animals is admirable," Zivex commented as he applied the protective coating to Titan's teeth. "Many would see them only as dangerous beasts." Frank smiled. "They're endangered on Earth. Humans nearly hunted them to extinction before we realized what we were losing. Now we're trying to make it right." He scratched behind Titan's ear with renewed vigor, and the lion's eyes closed in contentment. "Besides, they're not so different from us. They want safety, comfort, respect." As Zivex completed the procedure, a thought occurred to him. "May I attempt the scratching technique?" Frank looked surprised but pleased. "Sure, if you want to. Let me show you exactly where." He guided one of Zivex's tentacles to the spot behind Titan's ear. Gentle pressure, small circular motions. With extreme caution, Zivex mimicked the scratching motion Frank had demonstrated. Titan's eyes opened briefly, regarding the alien with mild curiosity, then closed again as he leaned into the touch. A strange sensation filled Zivex's pride, wonder, and the dissolution of an ancient fear. Here he was, a descendant of prey animals, providing comfort to one of the most fearsome predators in the galaxy. "I believe he approves of my technique," Zivex said, his voice modulator betraying his excitement. Frank laughed. "You're a natural. Maybe there's a future for you in big cat medicine." After Titan was safely back in his transport cage, Zivex found himself reflecting on the experience. "Your Earth predators have taught me something valuable today, Frank Lawson." "What's that?" "That fear, while evolutionarily advantageous, can sometimes prevent understanding. I have spent my career avoiding predator species due to instinctual fear, yet today I learned they can be reasoned with, even befriended with the right approach." Frank nodded thoughtfully. "That's a lesson humans had to learn too. Our history is full of fear-based decisions that only created more problems." "Perhaps," Zivex suggested, "I should expand my practice to include more Earth predators, with your assistance, of course." "I'd be happy to help." "Actually, we have a whole shipment coming next month: tigers, wolves, and even a few bears for the new Earth biodome on Nexus." Instead of panic, Zivex felt a thrill of anticipation. "I shall study their anatomies thoroughly before their arrival." "And perhaps you can teach me more about these scratching techniques." Frank grinned. "It would be my pleasure, Doctor." Word of Dr. Zivex's newfound specialty spread quickly through the Interstellar Medical Exchange program. Over the following weeks, more Earth predators were brought to his clinic, each accompanied by Frank, who patiently demonstrated the specific ways each species preferred to be handled. Wolves, Zivex discovered, enjoyed scratches along their necks as well as behind their ears. Tigers were similar to panthers, but required more respect for their personal space. Bears, surprisingly gentle despite their immense strength, responded well to scratches under their chins. With each new species, Zivex's confidence grew. His tentacles no longer trembled at the sight of sharp teeth and claws. Instead, he found himself fascinated by the unique anatomies and behaviors of Earth's predators. One morning, a month after his first encounter with Shadow, Zivex arrived at his clinic to find Frank waiting with an urgent expression. "We have an emergency," Frank explained quickly. "A young female tiger was injured during transport. She's in pain and highly agitated. None of our handlers can get close enough to treat her." Zivex didn't hesitate. "Bring her in immediately." The transport team arrived moments later with a special containment unit. Inside, a beautiful Siberian tiger paced in obvious distress. Blood matted the fur on her right shoulder, and she snarled at anyone who approached. "Laceration from a broken panel in her transport container," Frank explained. "She needs immediate treatment before infection sets in, but she's not letting anyone near her." Zivex studied the injured tiger, noting her dilated pupils and aggressive posture. Fear and pain were driving her behavior. In that moment, he realized he understood exactly how she felt. "I will treat her," Zivex declared. Frank looked concerned. "Are you sure?" "She's not calm like the others were. This is dangerous, even for me." "I believe I can help her." Zivex prepared a mild sedative spray and surgical tools. "Open the containment unit, but be ready to close it if necessary." With visible hesitation, Frank operated the controls to create a small opening in the unit. The tiger growled menacingly, backing into a corner. Zivex approached slowly, all four of his eyes focused on the tiger's body language. "I understand your fear," he said softly, knowing the tiger couldn't comprehend his words but might respond to his tone. "You are injured and among strangers. I, too, know what it is to feel vulnerable." The tiger's growl deepened, but Zivex continued his careful approach. With deliberate movements, he extended one tentacle toward the tiger, stopping just short of contact. "I am not a threat," he continued in the same soothing tone. "I wish to help ease your pain." To everyone's amazement, the tiger's growl subsided slightly. She eyed Zivex's tentacle with suspicion, but didn't strike. Very slowly, Zivex moved his tentacle to the uninjured side of the tiger's head, finding that special spot behind her ear that Frank had taught him. With gentle pressure, he began the circular scratching motion. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the tiger's aggressive posture softened. Her eyes remained fixed on Zivex, but the murderous intent faded, replaced by cautious tolerance. "Frank," Zivex said quietly, "the sedative spray, please." Frank carefully handed the device to Zivex, who maintained the ear scratching with one tentacle while using another to administer a light dose of sedative. The tiger flinched slightly, but remained relatively calm under Zivex's touch. As the sedative took effect, the tiger's eyelids grew heavy. She lay down on the floor of the containment unit, still watching Zivex but no longer showing signs of aggression. "Remarkable," Frank whispered. "I've never seen her calm down so quickly for anyone." With the tiger sedated, Zivex was able to properly examine and treat her wound. The laceration was deep, but had missed any vital structures. He cleaned it thoroughly, applied regenerative tissue compounds, and sealed it with a medical adhesive that would dissolve as the wound healed. Throughout the procedure, Zivex maintained contact with the tiger, one tentacle continuing the gentle scratching behind her ear even as the others worked to repair her injury. "Why do you think she responded to you when she wouldn't let any of us near her?" Frank asked as they monitored the tiger's recovery. Zivex considered the question. "Perhaps because I approached her not as a predator or prey, but as a healer, and perhaps because I truly understand her fear." He looked at Frank. "My species evolved to flee from danger. Her species evolved to fight, but we both know vulnerability, and we both recognize compassion when it is offered." The tiger made a full recovery over the next few days, and to everyone's surprise, she remained calm whenever Zivex approached her enclosure. She would still growl at other staff members, but for the alien veterinarian, she would often push her head against the barrier, seeking those now familiar scratches. News of Zivex's success spread beyond the medical exchange program. Scientists and veterinarians from across the Interstellar Alliance began consulting him about Earth predator species. Some even traveled to observe his techniques firsthand. 6 months after his first encounter with Shadow, Zivex received a formal invitation from the Earth delegation. They were establishing a new conservation center on Nexus Station, dedicated to preserving endangered Earth species, and they wanted Zivex to serve as their chief veterinary officer. "Your unique perspective and abilities have proven invaluable," the invitation read. Your work has demonstrated that understanding across species barriers is not only possible but essential for conservation efforts. Frank personally delivered the invitation. So, what do you think? Ready to take on a facility full of Earth's most dangerous predators? Zivex, who once trembled at the mere sight of sharp teeth, found himself excited by the prospect. I would be honored, though I must insist you remain as an advisor. My scratching technique still requires refinement, Frank laughed. Deal, and just wait until you meet the elephants. They're not predators, but they're something special. The day before Zivex was scheduled to leave for Nexus Station, a special visitor arrived at his clinic. The transport cage was now familiar, as was the sleek black panther inside it. Shadow, Zivex said in surprise. Is she ill? Frank shook his head, smiling. No, she's perfectly healthy, but she's being transferred to Nexus 2, and I thought you might want to say hello before the journey. She was your first Earth predator, after all. Zivex approached the cage without hesitation. Shadow watched him with those intelligent amber eyes, and to his delight, she immediately moved toward him, pushing her head against the bars of the cage with practiced ease. Zivex extended a tentacle and found that special spot behind her ears. Shadow closed her eyes and leaned into his touch, a rumbling purr emanating from her chest. Remarkable how far we've come, Frank observed. 6 months ago, you could barely stay in the same room with her. Zivex continued the gentle scratching, watching as the once terrifying predator melted under his touch. She taught me an important lesson that day, one that I believe applies to more than just veterinary medicine. What's that? That often, what we fear most only needs to be understood. Zivex's 4 eyes blinked in what Frank had come to recognize as his species' version of a smile. And sometimes, understanding begins with something as simple as a scratch behind the ears. As Shadow's purrs filled the examination room, Zivex reflected on his journey from terrified prey to confident healer. The ancient instincts still existed within him. He could feel his heartbeat quicken whenever a predator roared or snarled, but they no longer controlled him. Instead, they informed his approach, helping him understand the animals in his care from a unique perspective. You know, Frank said thoughtfully, I think that's why the Earth delegation specifically requested you for the Nexus facility. Your perspective is valuable precisely because you see these animals differently than we do. How so? Zivex asked, still scratching Shadow's favorite spot. Humans have a complicated relationship with predators. We admire them, fear them, sometimes even worship them. But we also have this tendency to see ourselves as separate from them, as masters rather than fellow travelers. Frank watched as Shadow pushed harder against Zivex's tentacle, seeking more contact. You see them without those cultural biases. You recognize the danger they pose, but you also see them as individuals worthy of care and respect. Zivex considered this. Perhaps that is why the scratching technique works so well when I perform it. I approach with respect born of genuine awe, not dominance. The next day, as Zivex prepared to board the transport ship to Nexus Station, he found himself surrounded by his colleagues from the Interstellar Medical Exchange Program. Many had been skeptical when he first began working with Earth predators, concerned that his natural fears would interfere with treatment. Now they gathered to wish him well in his new position. The Nexus facility is lucky to have you, said Dr. Melbury, an avian physician from Avios Prime. Your work with Earth species has opened new avenues of interspecies medical cooperation. Thank you, Zivex replied, touched by the recognition, though I must credit Frank Lawson for his guidance. Without his instruction on the art of ear scratching, I might still be hiding in my office whenever a predator arrives. Laughter rippled through the group, and Frank, standing nearby with Shadow's transport cage, gave a modest shrug. The technique is simple. It was Zivex who had the courage to try it, despite every instinct telling him to run. As the boarding call sounded, Zivex took one last look at the medical facility that had been his home for the past 3 years. He had arrived as a specialist in Azurian physiology, expecting to treat primarily his own kind and perhaps a few similar species. He was leaving as an expert in Earth predator medicine, bound for a facility where he would be surrounded by creatures his ancestors would have fled from in terror. The journey to Nexus Station took 4 days in hyperspace. During transit, Zivex divided his time between studying files on the Earth species awaiting him and visiting the ship's cargo hold, where Shadow and several other animals were being transported. On the final day of the journey, as Nexus Station appeared on the viewscreen, a massive artificial ring orbiting a terraformed moon Frank found Zivex in the cargo hold. His tentacle extended through the bars of Shadow's cage, providing the scratches she had come to expect from him. Nervous about the new position? Frank asked, joining him. Zivex's skin rippled in the Azurian equivalent of a shrug. Less nervous than I would have been 6 months ago, though I admit some apprehension about the scale of the facility. The files indicate over 200 Earth predator species. 217 to be exact, Frank confirmed. Everything from tiny venomous snakes to polar bears, but you'll have a full staff and I'll be there to help you get settled. Shadow pushed her head against Zivex's tentacle, demanding more attention, and the alien veterinarian obliged, finding that perfect spot behind her ear. It occurs to me, Zivex said thoughtfully, that my journey with Earth's predators parallels humanity's own evolution in many ways. Frank raised an eyebrow. How do you figure? Your earliest ancestors were prey animals, small mammals hiding from larger predators. Yet over time, you developed relationships with those same predators, first wolves, then other species. You learned to coexist, even collaborate. Zivex watched as Shadow's eyes closed in contentment. In a few short months, I have compressed millions of years of your evolutionary history into my own experience. Frank smiled. I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right. Maybe that's why humans and Azurians get along so well despite our different evolutionary paths. We both know what it means to overcome fear. As the ship docked at Nexus Station, Zivex felt a surge of anticipation. The facility awaiting him represented a new frontier in interspecies cooperation, not just between intelligent life forms, but between a sentient being and the predators that once would have hunted his kind. The docking procedures completed, and Frank helped coordinate the unloading of the animal transports. Shadow's cage was carefully moved to a specialized vehicle that would take her to the conservation center. Before she left, Zivex approached for one final scratch. I will see you at the facility soon, he told the panther, knowing she couldn't understand his words but hoping she recognized his tone. Shadow pushed against his tentacle one last time, that familiar rumbling purr vibrating through her powerful body. As the transport vehicles departed, Frank turned to Zivex. Ready to see your new workplace, the conservation center exceeded all of Zivex's expectations. Built to mimic Earth's various ecosystems, it spanned an entire section of Nexus Station. Lush forests, grassy savannas, Arctic zones, and even a small ocean had been recreated with painstaking accuracy. The medical facility at the heart of the center was state-of-the-art, equipped with technology from a dozen different worlds. Zivex's office overlooked a central habitat where several species coexisted peacefully, including Shadow, who had already been released into her new home. This is extraordinary, Zivex said as Frank completed the tour. The integration of medical science from across the Alliance will allow us to provide care beyond what was possible on Earth. That's the idea, Frank agreed. Combining human understanding of Earth species with alien medical technology and perspectives like yours. It's a whole new approach to conservation. Over the next few weeks, Zivex settled into his role, meeting his staff a diverse team of human and alien veterinarians, each bringing unique skills to the center. He established protocols for regular health checks, emergency responses, and preventative care, and always at the core of his approach was the principle he had learned from Frank: respect, trust, and knowing where they liked to be scratched. 3 months into his tenure at Nexus, Zivex faced his first major challenge. A territorial dispute had broken out in the savanna habitat between 2 male lions, resulting in serious injuries to both. The medical team rushed to separate and stabilize the animals, but one a young male named Atlas had sustained a deep chest wound that threatened his life. As Zivex prepared for emergency surgery, he found himself facing not just a medical challenge, but an emotional one. Atlas was not merely a patient, he had become in some indefinable way a friend. The lion recognized Zivex, responded to his presence, trusted him enough to accept those ear scratches even when in pain. His vital signs are weakening, reported Dr. Tilaxu, a reptilian physician from Soros VI. We must proceed immediately. With Frank assisting, Zivex performed the delicate surgery, repairing damaged blood vessels and tissue while continuously monitoring Atlas's condition. Throughout the procedure, he maintained contact with the sedated lion, one tentacle resting behind his ear, providing that familiar comfort even in unconsciousness. After 4 tense hours, Atlas was stabilized. The wound was repaired, regenerative compounds applied, and the prognosis was cautiously positive. He will need close monitoring for the next 48 hours, Zivex told his team. I will take the first watch. That night, as Zivex sat beside Atlas's recovery enclosure, he reflected on how completely his life had changed since that first frightening encounter with Shadow. The lion before him, powerful enough to kill him with a single swipe, now depended on him for survival. Frank found him there in the early morning, still maintaining his vigil. How's he doing? His vital signs have stabilized, Zivex reported. I believe he will make a full recovery. Frank nodded, relief evident in his expression. Good, he's important to the breeding program. He studied Zivex for a moment. You know, when I first suggested you for this position, there were some who doubted an Azurian could overcome their instinctual fear enough to work effectively with predators. A reasonable concern, Zivex acknowledged. I shared it myself. But I knew they were underestimating you, Frank smiled. Just like humans often underestimated these animals, seeing only teeth and claws, not the complex beings behind them. Atlas stirred in his enclosure, eyes opening briefly. When he saw Zivex, the lion made a soft chuffing sound, a vocalization of recognition. Without hesitation, Zivex extended a tentacle through the bars, finding that special spot behind Atlas's ear. The lion leaned into the touch, then drifted back to sleep. 6 months ago, that interaction would have been impossible, Zivex observed. Not because Atlas would have behaved differently, but because I would have. My fear would have prevented me from seeing him as anything but a threat. And now, Frank asked. Zivex continued the gentle scratching, watching as Atlas's breathing deepened into peaceful sleep. Now I see him as he truly is, a magnificent being with his own needs, fears, and capacity for trust. The teeth and claws are still there, the danger still real, but it no longer defines our interaction. Frank nodded thoughtfully. That's the secret humans learned over thousands of years of coexisting with predators. Respect the danger, but see beyond it to the relationship that's possible. 1 year after Zivex's arrival at Nexus Station, the Conservation Center hosted a delegation from the Interstellar Alliance Council. Representatives from 27 worlds toured the facility, observing Earth's endangered species in their carefully recreated habitats. As Chief Veterinary Officer, Zivex led the tour of the medical facilities, explaining the integrated approach they had developed. The demonstration that drew the most attention, however, was his interaction with the predators. In the central savanna habitat, Zivex approached a group of lounging lions, including Atlas, now fully recovered and integrated back into his pride. To the astonishment of the delegates, the massive predators greeted the Azurian with what could only be described as affection, pushing their heads against his tentacles, seeking those familiar scratches. Remarkable, commented the Vosgian ambassador, her crystalline form shimmering with interest. On my world, predator and prey relationships are fixed and unchangeable. This suggests a flexibility we had not considered possible. It is a lesson I have learned through direct experience, Zivex replied, scratching Atlas behind the ears. What we fear most often reflects our own limitations, not the true nature of what we fear. As the tour concluded, the delegates presented Zivex with a formal recognition. the Interstellar Alliance Medal for Advancement in Cross-Species Understanding. The citation noted his pioneering work in predator medicine and the broader implications for interspecies relations throughout the Alliance. That evening, after the delegates had departed, Zivex made his usual rounds of the habitats. He stopped, as always, at Shadow's enclosure. The panther who had once terrified him now greeted him like an old friend, rumbling her distinctive purr as he extended a tentacle through the barrier. "Hello, old friend," he said softly, finding that perfect spot behind her ear. "We have come a long way together, have we not?" As Shadow leaned into his touch, eyes closing in contentment, Zivex reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a terrified veterinarian backing away from a transport cage to the chief medical officer of the most advanced conservation facility in the Alliance. And it had all begun with a simple lesson from Frank Lawson. That sometimes, what looks like the most dangerous creature in the room just needs a gentle scratch behind the ears to reveal its true nature. Shadow's purrs filled the quiet evening air, a sound that once signaled danger to Zivex's instincts, but now represented trust, connection, and the remarkable capacity of all living beings to move beyond the limitations of their evolutionary past. In that moment, with his tentacle gently scratching behind the ears of a creature his ancestors would have fled from in terror, Dr. Zivex understood a truth that would guide his work for years to come. That healing began not just with medical knowledge, but with the courage to reach across boundaries of fear and find the common ground that existed between all living beings, no matter how sharp their teeth or how different their worlds.